filters and their preventative maintenance plans, visit M&S Air Conditioning at ac-florida.com.
When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. It's time to rack it up. Oh my God! Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint program. Inside the Paint is brought to you by Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Yeah, hell yes! Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint show.
Are you ready?
All right, welcome to Inside the Paint here on OnSideRadio.com, our new home, which is Monday, every single Monday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at 5 Reasons Sports and at Ethan J. Skolnick. We've got Ira Winderman from the Sun Sentinel. You can follow him at Ira Heatbeat. Of course, this is sponsored by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah, 305-424-8547. All right, let's get right into some things that were said last week. And look, since we last spoke,
sure,
a lot of things have happened, of course. The Heat survived the other night against the Bulls, although that late-game management was about as bad as I've seen from a Heat team in a while.
And they'll, of course, tell you that the officiating was an issue and that they got called for a 3-shot foul that shouldn't have been called and an 8-second violation that involved deflection. And you know what, Ethan, when you're up 24 against a Chicago Bulls team without Zach LaVine, you should just win the game and move on like you should tonight. But that's the story of this Heat season.
Right, and we're going to get into why this is the story of this Heat season. And then, of course, the Atlanta game, which was, I mean, that is symbolic of this Heat year. When I had to put up a poll of what's the worst loss for this year, Twitter only allows you 4 options.
Right.
And so I put up 4, and the Atlanta game actually won, but there were about 7 others that I could have put on there that people were mentioning that I'd forgotten. No, I haven't forgotten them. There's just been sort of unconscionable loss after unconscionable loss.
And the other part of that is, because I mentioned this in my Ask Ira at sunsentinel.com today, you can go through and get into double digits on bad losses. It's interesting. Quality wins, you're very limited on. And they've been blown out way more than they've blown other teams out. So you could almost make an argument that their record right now almost overstates who they are.
Their net rating actually suggests that, by the way.
Right. That again, and they'll point to Jimmy Butler, 10 games COVID absence, Philadelphia games, we didn't have people. You know what? I say this all season, and I think this is where any argument stops. After what has happened this season to the Toronto Raptors, no other team can be in the complaint box.
Correct.
Because there is clearly a winner in the clubhouse about team most screwed by COVID. No home games, all the COVID absences, everything that's gone on. Everyone else just deal with it. But I mean, yeah, a week before, it's lucky we don't do this on Saturdays. And honestly, it's fortunate for the Heat, there's not much local sports media on weekends.
Right.
Because between the Minnesota loss 2 Fridays ago and the Atlanta loss this past Friday, it's like Fridays have been like hell nights for this team.
Yeah, they have been bad. In fact, we've decided to pod after both, which we don't typically do on the
Friday
weekends.
night frights, yeah.
It's been bad. All right, so this has been an incredibly inconsistent team. People say they play down to the competition, and I threw this out there this weekend on Twitter. I'm like, maybe they're not playing down to the competition. Maybe this is who they are. And we keep talking about random scrub Heat killers. But if it's happening every night, and particularly if it's happening every night at the same position, maybe they're not the scrubs. Maybe the guys defending them are not good enough to consistently hold these guys to what they should be. And I think that gets into Jimmy Butler's comments. And that's where we're going to start today. Jimmy made the comments, obviously, not after the Chicago game, but prior to that, about how they've been consistent in the fact that they've been inconsistent. And I think what you and I need to address today a little bit is the coaching. Because I think both you and I have covered, obviously, Eric since the beginning, since 2008. We've both known Eric a whole lot longer than that. I think both you and I have praised Eric incessantly over the years for various jobs that he's done.
Which people never notice. They only hear the criticism.
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, I think that, look, in any other organization, a guy who's been here for 13 years, okay, would get more criticism maybe from the media.
And we get ripped from that from our friend Frank Isola in New York, from people around the country. They're soft on Heat. They go easy on him. They buy into this culture thing.
Right.
It's like if you're not tabloid vicious, then you're being too soft on someone also.
Right.
I have the entire theory on Spoelstra and the Heat this season. One, we have to start with the premise, Ethan. This is like no other season. Between the testing, but more the compacted schedule and what's going on. Everything the Heat do in Eric Spoelstra's system is hard. So, you are asking players to give more than players on probably any other team in a compacted season with an older roster. It seems every time the Heat loses someone who's 30 or older, it's almost like Andy Ellisberg is not allowed to sign anyone unless he's at least 30. When you look at Dedmon, you look at Ariza, some of the moves they've made, they go for the old guys, even Nemanja, who is not playing anymore. But my thought is this. And this is all based on pregame comments from opposing coaches, which tend to open the window a little. What's the first thing they praise? The Heat's defense and how they're just constant and they're unremitting. And you can see when the Heat defends, they will switch and they will re-switch and they will cover and they will recover and they will close out. The Heat's defensive system requires an immense amount of energy in 24 seconds. Yes, usually they'll force the other team into a late shot clock shot, but that means you've been defending 22 seconds. What's the second thing we hear from opposing coaches before games? The Heat's offensive system. How with the dribble handoffs and the pick and rolls, how they'll run through 4, 5, 6, 7 options trying to wear you down in their half-court offense. That's why this Heat has the slowest pace rate in the league. They slow you down on defense. They slow themselves down by running through so much stuff. You are asking, Ethan, players to put in so much effort when you have this compacted schedule, when you have no practice time and no time off, and you have an old roster. That might work in a typical season. That might work after a 4-month break for COVID like last year, where everyone gets to exhale, and I know none of us enjoyed being in our house and doing nothing, but for the Heat, it was the best thing that could happen from a basketball sense. I think Eric Spoelstra didn't adjust to the season enough, and you know what? I don't know if he could have known ahead of time what it was going to be like. But what he is asking for his players, I believe, is more than any other coach, including Tom Thibodeau, asks of his players.
And you mentioned the bubble. And what's been described to me is the bubble was, again, the perfect place for a coaching staff like this that does expect a lot from the players. It's incredibly regimented. There's nowhere else for them to go.
Right.
It's purely about basketball. You know exactly when you're going to practice, and you know pretty much that's the highlight of the day.
And the practice court is literally steps from your bed.
Correct.
You don't have to try to get practice time. It's there all the time. We heard the stories about even after the regular practices, Heat players will go back in the evening. They reserve time for them. It was everything set up for them. So, again, when people use the word it was a fluke, no, to me, it was a perfect setup. It was what's the best system for the Miami Heat to thrive in the playoffs? It's in a bubble where there's no distractions, where there's the phrase we always hear,
basketball
external
summer camp.
noise.
Essentially, yeah. It was like, remember, where did Eric Spoelstra take the big three when they first got together? He took them to a military base.
Yes.
This was essentially going to, in a sense, from a basketball perspective, a military base. Everything is regimented. You wake up at this time in the morning, you go out to the court. And so, like you said, they had the disadvantage of having the shorter break than anybody else but the Lakers. We see what's happened to the Celtics this year, too. Okay? You see, obviously, Denver's had a major injury, etc. The final four teams,
yes.
Final four teams, Denver has still played well, but the final four teams standing have had a bunch of issues. Okay? And you had this very short break, and then you come back into it. You've got your 34-year-old point guard who's coming back, from a serious foot injury. We're going to talk about him a little bit more later in the show. But and I do think that maybe there was a lack of adjustment. So let's get to it, okay? Eric Spoelstra's been here since 2008. We're gonna do this rapid fire, okay? You tell me. Good season, okay season, bad season for Eric, okay? 2008, 2009.
Very good season. Breaking in Beasley and Chalmers, getting within one win against the Hawks from going in the second round, and if not for Jermaine O'Neal's migraine, probably making the second round.
09-10.
topping out at what you can be. Dwayne Wade saying, I ain't going out in the first round anymore, proving limited in the playoffs with what you have.
Yeah, I think exceeding expectations in both of those years. 10-11.
Learning curve, first-time coaching superstars, realizing it's a different world, getting them to do what you want them to do instead of doing only what they wanted to do.
I give him in slightly above average grade for that season, but not like the previous two. 11-12.
The start of coaching brilliance, getting players to think outside of the box, reinventing I think his best coaching season.
I don't know if it was his best, but I think he was excellent. 12.
Of course, if they lose to Boston in either of those two games, everything changes.
Correct. Yeah, I think
and he's not coaching
I think
anymore.
it was his best coaching playoffs. I think that was his best coaching playoffs.
Right.
I don't know if it was his best coaching season.
And I think that's the only time I truly believe, except for his first few games of that season, that he was in danger of losing his job. I think if they lost to Boston in that Eastern Conference Finals, LeBron's people, I think you were at the arena that night also.
No, we were.
That was the buzz in Game 7 if they lose.
You remember we were there. I want to do this wrap up. Remember we were there after shoot-around, I believe, at TD Garden, and that was our conversation that we were all having. Is this it for Spo?
And even then, LeBron's people were saying before Game 7 back at American Airlines Arena that if they don't win this one, LeBron's going to go to Pat and demand a coaching change.
Absolutely. All right, 12-13.
I would say very good. I know they got the break on Ray Allen, but to sustain 3 straight years in the finals, I think
27-game winning streak. That's a really good season. 13-14.
You know what? Awful from the expectation standpoint of for the first time it was unraveling. And Ray Allen was questioning. And James Jones, loyal Heat soldier, was questioning. And LeBron was half a foot out the door, and the Heat didn't know what the heck to do about it. So I would say it might have been his most trying season.
And, of course, the Dwayne situation, which he had to manage the whole year. I think a lot of that, I say slightly above average to average. I think a lot of that in 13-14 was really a front office issue. I don't think they gave him enough to work with, honestly. I mean, when you knew that Dwayne was going to miss time and Tony Douglas was the solution, that's not great. 14-15 after LeBron leaves.
I give it almost an incomplete just because you had the Chris Bosh situation, just because you had the Goran Dragic trade coming in. So, okay, but, sort of retooling back to where he was before the Big Three.
Yeah, I would say okay. 15-16.
A great season.
Great season.
I mean, they were within one victory of going to the
Without
unbelievable, but the drama with Bosh.
Yes.
Where it seems like there was going to be a lawsuit almost every day on what was going on. So, held it together beautifully.
And they were printing up T-shirts, right? I mean, the crowd and all the rest. I thought that was an excellent season. Moving Deng to the 4, everything he did, managing Whiteside, and they probably do get to the Eastern Conference Finals if Hassan doesn't get hurt, to be honest. 16-17.
2 different seasons.
Yeah.
So terrible first half. But really, I think one of his best seasons because what the heck other coach in the world gets a team to come back from 11:30 and still believing.
Right.
So it's almost like he coached himself into a front office hole because of what happened in the offseason.
Yeah, I think
he almost did too good in the second
half.
half.
Brilliant season, though. 17-18. It's hard for me to even remember that one, to be honest, right?
Yeah, 17-18, that was a playoff season out in the first round against Philadelphia, correct?
No. Yes, right? That's the one season that escapes me.
To me, it's like a sleepwalking season. So
yeah, 18-19, Dwayne's last year. It felt like it was all about Dwayne, right?
Yeah, it wasn't
tough
a
to
season,
manage.
and I honestly think, and again, it's not for me to stand in someone else's place, but I think Spoelstra almost made it into more of that when he realized it wasn't going anywhere. I don't believe Eric the full-time, not to condescend or anything, but I think he made it about Dwayne when he realized it couldn't be about anything else.
I think that's fair, and of course he was still dealing with the Hassan thing, and I think at the end of his rope, 1920 was tremendous in terms of the beginning of it obviously was incredible. He exceeded expectations. Struggles going into the COVID break, but then
let's not forget before the COVID break and that bad loss to Charlotte, before the mood in the arena really became profound there. That was a very sort of, stuck in the mud kind of season. So like we talked about, I think the bubble absolutely saved it. There were real questions about the mediocrity of this team and is this all there is?
But to be fair, most people didn't have them playing as well as they played the first 30 games of the year. Like they came out of
they built
came
equity.
out of the
they built
chute.
it was the opposite of this season. They built enough equity to survive it. Yeah.
All right, so this one.
You know what? It's all based on what happened the last thing we remember from last season. So this is what I think. I think the Heat overachieved last year. So in that respect, they are underachieving this year. But the last 2 NBA seasons, when we go back in history, are going to be the asterisk seasons. There's been nothing like this. It's so trying and so different. There's no coach in any sport who got players arriving on road games at 4 in the morning and testing for COVID at 8 in the morning, telling your players to stay rested, but not letting your players stay rested, losing guys. Philadelphia games, the 2 games in Philly when they had no one, and they definitely should have said that Tyler couldn't play and replayed the games later in the season. Those are going to bite him in the butt at the end of the year, those 2 losses against the Sixers. So I think the last 2 seasons, almost for any coach, are a wash. And Ethan, a matter of fact, and I know we're hard up against the break here, I think any team that fired his coach in the last 2 years needs to look in the mirror, because these just were abnormal seasons, and I think the expectations on anyone were too great. I would have no issue if the Heat go out in the first round of the playoffs, they struggle. I'd say, hey, whatever, 2 years, move on, let's get back to reality next season.
I think the Hawks, though, will stand as the counter to that, because obviously they've made themselves a season now after making the change from Lloyd Pierce to Nate McMillan. We'll see if it lasts, because we know Nate struggled in the playoffs typically. But
exactly,
and
we might see him in the playoffs.
Yeah, it might see him in the playoffs. And I will say this as we're going to pivot, and we're going to get into Oladipo and Dragic next. But I think Eric's season is basically defined by what happens from here. All right,
just like last season wasn't in the bubble.
Right, from this moment. I mean, from right now, it teeters either way. But usually, in all these seasons that we talked about, whether it was 30-11 or moving Deng into the starting lineup, or not starting lineup, but the 4th spot when Bosch went out, Eric Spoelstra figures things out as the year goes on. And it feels like this year he's still grasping for it.
Got a lot to figure out. When we go through the schedule in our last segment, we'll talk about the challenge ahead.
Absolutely. All right, sponsored by Pallet Rack City. We're going to be right back here on OnSideRadio.com and Inside the Paint. We will get into Oladipo and some numbers that we uncovered over in my network yesterday on Goran Dragic that I think will surprise people.
Onside Radio, the only choice for the South Florida sports fan.
When you're looking for curtains and blinds to create a space of your own, look no further than Bandalux. Bandalux can tailor your space to your needs. Create the atmosphere and ambiance you desire. We invite you to discover it at Bandalux.com. Explore our new solar control systems, range of sustainable fabrics, and energy-efficient solutions that can improve your well-being and quality of life. Witness Bandalux Beauty. Go to Bandalux.com or follow them on Instagram at Bandalux_official. For a personal experience, A Shade Above Window Fashions in Davie and Sunrise is an official Bandalux partner.
It's toast. Smartest thing I did last year? Called B&T Windows and Doors and had PGT custom windows and doors installed in my house. Listen, it's spring. That means before you know it, we'll be hearing about the tropics churning. That means you need to get your home and family protected today. Call B&T right now and they'll get you installed ASAP with the best in the business, PGT Custom Windows and Doors. 954-233-0126 or bntwindowsanddoors.com. And P.S. Tell them you heard about them on Onside Radio.
WLESPN Sports Radio, where you can catch our draft party. Virtual draft party. But why when Onside Radio is doing it live with real people and real food and real beer? Because AM radio is over and our management is stupid.
South Florida's choice for sports talk. OnSideRadio.com.
Now that it's springtime, it's only getting hotter here in South Florida. Make sure your AC in your home or business is running smoothly by investing in a preventative maintenance plan from M&S Air Conditioning. And M&S is a Mitsubishi Diamond Elite contractor. When you purchase a new Mitsubishi electric mini split system, you'll get a 12-year warranty. Or install a high-efficiency polarized air filter in your AC unit that captures and destroys biological contaminants to improve air quality. M&S Air Conditioning have been providing prompt, honest, and reliable service for over 30 years. Schedule service or call to get more info on our preventative maintenance plans. Call 954-421-3680 or visit ac-florida.com.
Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local. It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah!
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on Inside the Paint here on OnSideRadio.com. Here every Monday at 10 a.m. Sponsored by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. I talked a lot of Eric Spoelstra in the first segment. You can always catch this on the podcast feeds afterwards. We appreciate it if you actually listen to what we say. All right, let's get instead of what gets aggregated by the aggregators, that gets aggregated by the aggregators, then aggregated by more aggregators. All right, let's get to part 2 here. Something that was just aggregated from something that you wrote. So I just always have to make sure that you actually wrote it, which was Victor Oladipo.
Yes.
And I was looking at, I think I was seeing on Heat Nation or one of these.
You know what's funny? So many times I'll see something, and I'll go, ooh, that's interesting. And then I realize it's related to like one of my answers in Ask Ira at sunsentinel.com,
Right.
just trying to give perspective. Oftentimes where it says, it seems from here, or the view is, or something like that,
Right.
and then it becomes fact.
Right. Okay. So now obviously it's fact because it's been reported here at Heat Nation or one. Oh, here we go. Heat at Heat Nation com. And they had pretty good following on this account. So this is what they tweeted. So you allow, because again we didn't really get a chance to do this about the Tyler Hero comments from last week. So let's get to this about the Victor Oladipo comments. Ira Winderman gives his opinion on the Victor Oladipo situation. Quote, at this point it is likely that any Oladipo return would come off the bench, likely leaving Kendrick Nunn in the first 5. At this point it would be difficult to ask Kendrick to step aside. Your thoughts on your thoughts?
My thoughts are I believe I even wrote that before he had his game on Saturday against the Bulls, which is just another step forward. That's not to say I know what the organization is going to do, because, Ethan, I think you would agree, and your platforms also, there almost always seems to be a twist at the start of the playoffs that we didn't necessarily see coming.
Correct.
We might have thought Goran was going to start in the playoffs, but we didn't know. We didn't know for sure that Myers Leonard was going to be asked to disappear, that Kelly Olynyk's role would be diminished, that Jake Crowder would be the starting power forward. So I never make the assumptions from point A to point Z because you don't know, because when the Heat have time to think something over. But the reality is now, Kendrick Nunn has become such a contributor to your team that I can't see ever happening again. What happened the previous time when he started is like, thank you for your effort. Good job, good effort. We'll call you when we need you again. Now up to the practice court. And the other part about Victor Oladipo is this ticking clock. We are down to 11 games left. Tonight against the Bulls, he's already been ruled out. There's 10 games left. At a certain point, you have to get a continuity, and I know you always go back to one player in one season and one point in time, and that's the Alonzo Mourning return from his kidney illness when Anthony Mason had an All-Star Game starter season. They were on a nice roll, and instead, and I understand where Pat was coming from that season, is that he thought, with the team we have now, of the good job, good effort of Eddie Jones and Brian Grant, you know, and what Anthony Mason did, that we could make some noise in the playoffs.
Correct.
But with Zoe, we can contend for a conference championship. That's sort of similar this year. I think if you stay with what you have now, you can make some noise in the playoffs. I think if you get Victor Oladipo back to his all-star self in Indiana, you can contend for the Eastern Conference Championship. But nothing has shown us that that can happen.
Right.
It didn't show us in Houston when he sat out the second night of back-to-backs. It didn't show us after he showed up for a 4-game cameo right here. And at a certain point, you just have to move forward with what works. That doesn't mean it can't change. It just means as of this date, with this many games left, it's really hard to look at this team as a Victor Oladipo starting 5 team.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. First thing to unpack is I just realized that was exactly 20 years ago, that which makes me feel ancient. Because I remember that whole 42 and 27. And Mason was playing great, was an all-star, and all the rest of this. They were pumping him up, and then you bring Zoe back. They go 8-5 down the stretch, and then they got blown out. Remember that press conference from Riley, embarrassed, humiliated, and all that by Charlotte with Ricky Davis running, up and down the floor.
And he has to learn how to coach again in the playoffs.
Right. I mean, it was just a total. And again, but that was integrating, and this is the difference I've tried to get through on the podcast. That was integrating Alonzo Mourning franchise cornerstone. I think this actually plays even more to your point, because with that, if Zoe was right, you play Zoe, okay? He's Zoe, okay? And he's the guy that you built the whole foundation of your franchise on. This is a guy you're kind of taking a look-see at to decide whether or not you want to pay him this offseason. It's not, Oladipo is not Zoe, and I think that actually plays a little bit more to your point. Let me ask you this question. Has Kendrick Nunn been their best small guard this season?
Kendrick Nunn has been their most consistent small guard this season.
Okay.
But if you're looking for greatness, you look at the flashes of Tyler Hero. No, Tyler Hero's highest highs have been better than Kendrick Nunn's highest highs. Goran Dragic's highest highs, I believe, game impact, have been higher than Kendrick Nunn's highest highs.
So few though.
But
For both.
still a chance there with
Right.
both of them. Kendrick Nunn is the consistent player who, unfortunately, whether he's shooting great or not, takes a lot of shots.
Yes.
So it's not always convenient for how your team plays that you wind up with Kendrick being Kendrick. Sometimes, look, and I know this because I know that you're on the Kendrick train to a degree now also, but there have been times when
Right.
Bam has had his low shot total games, and you look and Kendrick has taken 14 and Bam has taken 6, and you say, what is wrong with this box score? That's the difference.
But Kendrick has the right shot profile. This is why I want to pivot to Dragic. Kendrick has the right shot profile. We were looking at this last night. There was this perception that Kendrick was sort of this mid-range guy, right? 75% of his shots are either at the rim this year or from three. And he's incredibly efficient at both right now. He's shooting basically close to 40% from three. He's shooting 71% from the rim, at the rim. That's a Dragic. Those are old school Dragic numbers. Dragic used to shoot in the 70s from the rim. You know what Goran's shooting this year from the rim? 61%. And the reality is, Ira, this is what we found last night. And this is why I want to pivot to Goran, because sometimes the eye test lies. If you were to say to most fans, Goran is playing differently from last year, they would say, yes, he is playing differently. His shot profile is exactly the same as it was last season.
But
he's just not shooting well.
But not only not shooting well, but if you look at his shot profile, something very unique is happening with Goran this year. The shots are not coming on an equal basis per game. There are games when he has a lot of shots, and there are games when he has 3 shots.
Right.
And I think what is happening is Goran is recognizing the games he doesn't have it. And the games he doesn't have it, we've never seen this before, where you'll see Goran in big minutes take 3 shots. And he takes himself out of the offense. That's the difference.
Well, we saw it in 15-16 because he was deferring to Dwayne.
Right.
But
because
now
he
it
was
feels like
trying
he's
to fit
deferring
in.
to age.
Right,
It's different.
But there's still, so what's happening is I still think Goran's best games, if you can bottle them up and put them in a playoff series where there's 2 games off between games and it's not as tightly compacted, he can still give it to you. What Goran is doing is acknowledging, at least once a week and mostly now twice a week, he doesn't have it tonight. And he's smart enough when he doesn't have it to almost step aside and get out of the way and not take those full court breaks. The other thing about the profile with Kendrick Nunn and Goran at the rim is this. Goran has more of those in transition, the one-man fast break. And we've seen when he's good, he's very good about that. To go back to our first segment today, when Kendrick Nunn is driving to the rim, it's usually after 4 other passes, late on the shot clock. Every guy on offense has worked on that, and Kendrick realizes, I got to get to the rim and do my little flipsy shot that has worked this year after an exhausting offensive possession. Who else on this Heat team, and that's why they got Victor Oladipo. I'll ask this to you, seriously. Who else is a one-man fast break? Who's the other one-man fast break?
No, there isn't any.
You need that in today's NBA for the relief points.
But in the playoffs, the thing, how many of those actually exist? That's the thing, because some of that gets shut down. And that, look, again, to me, all 3 guys, Hero, Nunn, beyond Oladipo, Hero, Nunn, and Dragic, there's pluses and minuses to all of them. But the point that you made about one guy has been consistent, the other 2 you just can't count on this year. And the problem is when you're looking at the way Hero and Dragic, and I know Nunn still dies on some screens, okay? But if you look at the way Hero and Dragic have played together and what the numbers are when the 2 of them play together, it's at this stage, it's unplayable against most teams. It's just unplayable.
But you can get by in the regular season for this reason. Because we looked at what happened at the start of the 4th quarter against the Bulls, and it also was that start of the 4th quarter, if you remember, in Charlotte. The Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, man, it's like, oh my God. It's like, what are you expecting? It's like the definition of insanity.
Right.
If you keep playing Max Strus and Gabe Vincent together, these things will continue to happen. They happened in Charlotte, or Minnesota maybe it was that game when they started the 4th quarter.
That lineup
and they started again in Chicago. So you could use the depth of the regular season. When the playoff rotation tightens, this is going to get us back into last week's rabbit hole. If you are starting Kendrick Nunn, then what happens with Goran and with Tyler's minutes if Victor Oladipo comes back?
Well, that's the thing. That's what we're talking. You cannot play 4 of them. You cannot play 4 of them. You're playing 3 of them.
And so the good soldier
loses
Kendrick
out, which
Nunn
is
loses
Kendrick
out.
Nunn.
Because
I don't think that's
you're
right.
trying to find out about Victor Oladipo for the future.
Right.
2, you're trying to get sort of a sense of keeping Tyler Hero's value up in case you want to make a personnel move. And it just doesn't seem they would ever do that to Goran to sort of push him aside.
Unless Goran, well, we know about Goran's pride. and it's well earned. But we also know that Goran and Spo had their heart-to-heart last year about going to the bench.
It's one
initially.
thing to go to the bench and play starters minutes is another thing to go to the bench and play regular ninth man minutes.
Well, and I get it. And then there's the other factor, which is what do the two best players on the team want? Who do they trust the most? Do you think we're at a stage now where Jimmy and Bam trust Kendrick enough that they would be okay with Kendrick getting minutes, not over Hero, because I think both of them would be, honestly, at this point, okay? Because the inconsistency of Tyler, okay? Whatever his upside may be, which is obviously, I still believe greater than...
Where you're going with this, they would still rather have Goran on the floor because he is championship level tested and playoff level tested, and the memory is of what he did in the bubble, and the memory is of Goran at his best, who's still better than the other two.
Okay. I mean, I think that's fair, but my question is how you manage this situation. Because like you said, if Goran is realizing once a week that he doesn't have it, and then another game a week he's not playing... I mean, you're really talking about hoping to get good Goran once a week at this stage. I mean, and that's pretty much what it's been.
And then twice a week in the playoffs. And maybe that's all on hope and a prayer more than anything.
Okay, all right. Let's cycle back to Oladipo now. There's been almost nothing. I mean, you and I both work these lines, and we text people. There's been almost nothing.
Victor's people still say he's coming back this year. That's been their party line.
Right.
But then you keep waiting and waiting, and I would have thought the perfect night would be a second night of a back-to-back the other day where he stays at home and he plays against Chicago, nothing. And then you think tonight could be a night off for a Goran again, or Andre is getting the night off, still nothing. Victor Oladipo has not traveled with the Heat since being here.
Right.
So all of a sudden, after the San Antonio game, when they go out for those two games in Cleveland and Charlotte, does he actually get on a plane with the Miami Heat?
I doubt it.
It's just even
crazy. If he's doing court work, which I've heard he may be doing, I doubt it. And the other thing is, I mean, again, he's not going to give anything away on his socials or anything like that. I mean, he's posting about his music, and I think so. Heat fans are kind of like, I think most Heat fans at this stage, are kind of resigned to it at this point.
Except if they avoid the play-in, which will be hard, and we'll get to that.
Right.
Then all of a sudden you have a week for boot camp, and you can reboot everything.
Right.
And then all of a sudden come out with something completely different, and Eric Spoelstra tells you, we've had 4 great days with Vic running with our guys. We had 2 hard scrimmages. We brought in our referees to work the scrimmages, and we feel confident going forward. If they can avoid the play-in, then they basically can have the Victor Oladipo training camp, if he's healthy enough, that they've never had.
It's risky, though, to have a situation where you go into a first-round series with Oladipo as a starter when he hasn't been.
Your ultimate upside otherwise is mediocrity.
Well, right.
Unless you're just trying to show, hey, last year wasn't a fluke because we won 1 round this year. But Pat Riley always thinks bigger, and so to a degree does Eric Spoelstra.
And, okay, and then let's close the loop on this. You have a decision to make on him this offseason. If he doesn't come back this year, where do you go with that?
If Victor doesn't come back this year?
If he doesn't play. If they just get to a point, they're like, you know what? It's too late in the game here. We're shutting this thing down.
You offer Victor a way lower contract than he thought he was going to get, and you tell him almost like he's a restricted free agent like Kendrick Nunn and Duncan Robinson, show us something better out there, because he ain't going to find it.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. The only team I thought that might overbid for him is a team like New York. And I don't think they're gonna feel they're in the position that they have to do that.
Right.
If you're them, would you rather retain Derrick Rose? We talked about this a little last week at the mid-level than pay Victor Oladipo mid-level or more money? At this stage, would you just pay Rose?
If you have the salary cap money to take a chance on Vic and retain Derrick Rose, then I might. And they are flush with cash, so it's a matter of what else can they spend the money on, and that might be worth a flyer for them. Yeah,
it's interesting. All right, we're going to get into schedule and seeding stuff and what the hell's wrong with the Celtics, because I think that I think, look, again, what's happened with Miami this year, although it's frustrated Heat fans, they're not the only team that's been dealing with it, and we see the potential of the Nets and Durant and all that stuff. So are they just sort of uncatchable at this point? We see Philadelphia that lost a big one over the weekend as well. We'll be right back on Inside the Paint, sponsored by Pallet Rack City.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnsideRadio.com.
There's no need to drive around South Florida wasting valuable time looking for a new or certified pre-owned Acura. Go to the #1 volume sales dealership in the Southeast United States. Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. Purchase with pace and space in a dealership tailored to your needs. From home buying to providing that personal touch. Contact the 2020 Satisfaction Award winner Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. 888-776-5123. That's 888-776-5123. Or visit them at 15601 Pines Boulevard in Pembroke Pines. Inter Miami CF fans, join us at our new home this season for all away games as we broadcast live at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company, 1901 North Federal Highway in Pompano Beach. Join Big O and Alex Dono for the live pregame, halftime, and postgame shows while we watch the games. Enjoy meticulously brewed beer on site, delicious artisanal pizzas, live music, and giveaways. So, the new home for all Inter Miami road games is at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company at the Pompano City Mall, where they'll feature all the Inter Miami games. Follow them on Twitter at Dangerous Minds B and Facebook and Instagram at Dangerous Minds Brewing, and visit them at dangerousmindsbrewing.com.
Big O for M&S Air Conditioning. You know, air quality in your home and business is more important than ever. That's why you've got to call M&S Air Conditioning and let them install a high-efficiency polarized air filter in your AC unit. Folks, it attracts, captures, and destroys biological contaminants to improve your air quality. With stellar customer service, answering your call from 7:30 a.m. till 9 o'clock p.m. For more info on high-efficiency air filters and their preventative maintenance plans, visit M&S Air Conditioning at ac-florida.com.
If you're a Miami sports fan, then there's only one store to go to, and that's Caneswear at Miami Fanwear in Davie. They're your one-stop shop for all your Inter Miami CF, Canes, Dolphins, Panthers, and Marlins merchandise. They have hats, t-shirts, game day jerseys, and so much more. Located at 2511 South University Drive in Davie, and open 24/7 online at caneswear.com or intermiamiwear.com. Call them at 954-835-5597. Caneswear, the spot where Inter Miami and all Miami sports fans shop.
It's toast. When South Floridians need hurricane windows, there's only one crew to call, Brett and Tom at B&T Windows and Doors. They came to the crib last year, installed PGT windows and doors, and now I'm set. No more plywood, no more knuckle-busting wing nuts. PGT windows and doors will keep me and my family safe the next time a named storm comes rolling on through. Call B&T today, 954-233-0126, or bntwindowsanddoors.com. And P.S., do me a favor, tell them you heard about them on OnSideRadio.com.
Keeping you informed in the world of sports. With an OnSideRadio.com sports update.
Over the weekend, Inter Miami beat Philadelphia Union 2-1. Gonzalo Higuain scored in the 73rd minute. His brother Federico Higuain added a header for the win in the 83rd minute. Their next match at Nashville next Sunday. Pregame starts at noon and the call of the game at 1 p.m. Of course, you can catch the pregame show live at Dangerous Minds Brewing with Big O and Alex Dono. The Marlins, they lost 3-4 to the Giants over the weekend. The Fish are in Milwaukee starting tonight at 7:40. Trevor Rogers versus Corbin Burns, the pitching matchup. Saturday, the Miami Heat, they beat the Bulls 106-101. Duncan Robinson had 7 threes and scored 23 points. The Heat welcomed the Bulls to the AAA tonight, tip-off 8 p.m. And the Florida Panthers, they beat the Carolina Hurricanes 4-3 in overtime on a no-look shot by Barkov. That was on Saturday. Tuesday, the Panthers are in Nashville. They will take on the Predators. The puck drops at 8. You're listening to South Florida's only local sports talk station, OnSideRadio.com.
Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local. It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah!
Welcome back to Inside the Paint here on OnSideRadio.com. We're here every Monday from 10 to 11 here at the stadium. Obviously, good win for Inter Miami. We'll see where that thing goes. We're going to talk some Heat now the rest of the way, and I want to get into some of the fringe players, so to speak,
Okay.
or the vets who have made contributions this year and kind of what the Heat's options might be with them going forward. So we talk a lot about Dragic. You and I were talking about him more off the air. But look, Trevor Ariza and Dwayne Dedmon have kind of stepped in and solved, for all the problems that the Heat have had this year, those two guys have kind of solved problems that were ongoing for the entire first half of the season. I mean, they didn't have a four to play next to Bam Adebayo. Maybe Trevor's not ideal for that, but he certainly played his role as well as you could expect him to play it. And then you take a look at what Dwayne Dedmon has done. I mean, he's averaging 19 and 15 per 36 minutes since he came in. He's just given them a big body, which is what they needed. Do you think these are players, I mean, they're both in their 30s. Do you think these are players that the Heat are going to want to continue with?
I think it comes down to whether they're going to use salary cap space this offseason or not, and why it plays into that. If they use salary cap space because Victor Oladipo doesn't come back, I think you amass all your money there and you worry about everything else with minimums after and exceptions. But if they bring Victor Oladipo back and they're not a salary cap space team, all of a sudden they have the early bird rights for Trevor Ariza. Not a problem, whatever, to sign him up to the average salary. They could bring Dwayne Dedmon back again on his, non-bird rights and give him a little bit more than the minimum for next season. And they can stack these guys. This is the problem with the Heat, and it's been this way now for a couple of years. We're so caught up in the supporting players that we lose sight of the main players. And we're going to get to the Celtics and their struggles that they don't have much besides Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And the problem for the Heat is this. In a league where it's ever increasingly important to have athletic wings, the Heat have one in Tyler Hero.
I mean, an athletic is, I mean, what?
But I'm just saying, I mean, Jimmy's not an athletic wing.
No.
Jimmy, to me, is a basketball smarts. And
I think it was supposed
like
to be KZ, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, defensively maybe.
Right.
So that's the thing is, I think we get too caught up on the ancillary parts, and you have to start taking a real hard look. How are the Heat going to get another, even not athletic wing, another consistent scorer? Because Jimmy has to work his butt off to score. He doesn't mind doing that, but Jimmy works for his points. Bam has to work for his points. What the Heat don't have is an ease of offense guy, is a Bradley Beal, is a Devin Booker, is the kind of player who you don't got to go through, like we talked about the first segment of our show today, where it doesn't have to be systematic, where someone could just say, hey.
Well, you can get to the basket without a screen. I mean, the reality is that their guys now, Dragic, Hero, they can't get to the hoop without a screen.
Tyler sometimes can. Tyler sometimes with a little bit of a crossover and a little bit of his ball handling, depending on the matchup can. But that's the thing. Who is going to give the Heat easy buckets? Look, and that's the problem. Dwayne Dedmon doesn't give you easy buckets.
No.
He just plays off of other people on the alley-oops, on the roll. Trevor Ariza doesn't get you easy buckets. He spots up, someone else does the work, and if everything goes right, he's left open for the three-pointer. But who gets you easy buckets? Ethan, this is way too much work on defense and then way too much work on offense. That's what they have to look at. Who's the guy who's going to give you easy buckets? They don't have that on this roster. Goran was that.
Yes, he was.
At a point last year in the playoffs when he was revitalized after 4 months off during the pandemic shutdown. That's the problem for this team. So I don't want to get caught up on these ancillary. Can Andre Iguodala come back and give you another season because his defense has been robust? I get all of that. Blah, 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 blah. Who's going to get you easy points? You can't survive without it. And that's why the Wizards have made their climb up the standings. Because Rui Hachimura has been out. Thomas Bryant is out for the season. But because you have a Bradley Beal and because you have a Russell Westbrook, you have guys who could just, when it all goes to crap, get their own. When it all goes to the crap for the Heat, it all goes to crap.
No, that's true. And the reality is over the years, that's always been sort of a sticking point with the Heat. But the other thing that's been a sticking point and why I kind of pivot back to Ariza now is that when they haven't had a player like Ariza, they've had to constantly search for a player like Ariza. Like, we talk about Jay, and obviously as a small ball four, Iguodala that they made the trade for last year. And if they're not going to end up bringing Iguodala back, and I think the likelihood is they're probably not, then if you don't re-sign Ariza, they're going to look for another Ariza, right? That's just what they do. I mean, the way that Spoelstra wants to play, like I was on SiriusXM NBA yesterday, and Sam Mitchell asked me, he says, why don't they just put Bam, why don't they going forward get themselves a 5 and put Bam at the 4? And I said, because that's not, I said, and again, I've had Sam on my pod. I said, because Sam, that's not That's not who Eric Spoelstra is. You know
That's
that.
not how you play. That's not the
that's
system.
not-
You can't play 5 out that way.
Right.
You can't leave the lane open for Jimmy to do his attacking and get his free throws. It's a different style. I've said this. So you have to, if you're going to change the roster, you have to be willing to change the style. Eric Spoelstra at times has been very willing. Eric Spoelstra seems to be sold on a certain approach right now that requires a certain roster. Jay Crowder shooting threes, Trevor Ariza shooting threes, and that's what it is. There's also the question of if Bam gets matched up against similar Bams and athletic fours, is he the same player he is right now, or does that offset the quick first step and the extra burst that he has against bigger centers, even if sometimes they will physically dominate him on the other end? So how are you going to maximize Bam, especially when he's going into his max contract seasons?
I think what you need is a 4. Okay, and Ariza, again, has plugged the hole for now. But you need a 4 who can do a lot of the things that Trevor can do, but also is a plus rebounder. They have to find. To me, that's the guy that they need to find. They don't want to find another Myers Leonard to play next to Bam. I don't think that's the direction that Eric really wants to go. I think they did that last year, again, because they had a big body, and it worked for a little while, so he's stuck with it, okay? And Myers could space, okay? That's the thing. Myers was a 5 who could space. It's difficult to find those 5s who can space, who can also rebound. That is one of the reasons for whatever people's criticisms are of the Myers move, and then obviously we know what happened with Myers afterwards. It's one of the reasons he was attractive for Miami to keep, because there's 2 things he could do. He could be a big body inside.
Kelly was that way
and he
also.
could space the floor.
There was a bunch of success this year with Kelly Olynyk playing alongside Bam also.
Absolutely.
But there were concerns about defensive matchups. There were concern about rebounding. It's just, Ethan, the bottom line with this team is this team has a lot of flaws. And a lot of the flaws were masked in the bubble because of the times. So now you have no first-round draft choice. You might be limited in your salary cap space. You cannot afford to get a max salary guy. You're going to absolutely top out at $28 million if you get rid of a lot of other stuff. You have a one-dimensional Duncan Robinson where it just seems like there's over-celebration when he gets a layup. Oh, Duncan cut without the ball and got a layup. Let's stop the game and let's run the video. So that's the thing, is you have some limitation guys. Kendrick Nunn, a limitation guy. That he need to find that third wheel. Boston doesn't have the third wheel. Sometimes it's smart, sometimes Marcus Smart, sometimes it's Kemba Walker. Until you get that, Philly's finally gotten that now because Tobias Harris has come around to become that player.
Yeah.
Milwaukee went out and spent exorbitantly to get Drew Holiday to be that guy. Unless you're that guy, you're like the Heat. You're like the Knicks. Charlotte thinks they might get there with LaMelo and maybe with Rozier and maybe with Hayward when they're all ambulatory and healthy. But that's the thing is, so the real question is, how do you get the third guy? And that's our entire second segment today. You thought maybe Victor Oladipo would be that guy as the clock ticks and ticks and ticks.
And it was Goran in the bubble, as you mentioned. Here may be the fatal flaw with this roster ultimately going forward. And next we are going to pivot to the schedule and seeding in the last segment. Jimmy and Bam don't shoot threes. If you look around the league, how many teams' 2 best players are not three-point shooters these days? And the problem with that is it makes Duncan incredibly important. They cannot survive a bad Duncan Robinson shooting game. The biggest thing, that game against Atlanta the other night, okay, he doesn't shoot well, they lose. He shoots well against Chicago in the beginning of the game.
2 threes.
They survive.
2 threes against Atlanta, 7 threes against Chicago.
He is the barometer, but the only reason he's the barometer is because they're top 2 guys.
But it's even more than that, Ethan. It's then on the second unit who makes threes. When they have someone making threes in the second unit, whether it's Tyler or
Dragic,
whether it's Goran, you survive that also. So what happens now is, because of Duncan's defense, he usually gets 2 or 3 early fouls, and then you're screwed because you don't have someone else in there to space. It's incredible that last year it was nothing but three-point shooting during the bubble, and it defined them, and this year it's been such a struggle. So maybe if you get that other guy, like a Victor Oladipo is not a very good three-point shooter either, if his stroke comes around, you're not having to force feed Duncan Robinson, and that equation changes also. But again, like I keep stressing through today's show is this. Forget about your number 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 guy.
It's about your top
until
2.
you get your
And
3. I think it's your top 3. Until you get your third guy set, you're always going to be a limited team. Look at Denver when they were playing the best this season. They always had Jokic. They always had Murray. But all of a sudden, Michael Porter Jr. came into his own and made the difference. You look at Phoenix, the same thing. Their kids
Utah,
are coming
along.
The
the way Bogdanovich has played this
that
year,
you have
and,
to get,
and they lost
and matter of fact,
last year.
and go to Atlanta. Another Bogdanovich comes along. He comes along. He gets healthy. healthy, all of a sudden with Collins and with Trae Young, they have a little bit more.
And they
also
have a guy in Capella who's not asked to do more than he can do,
so
and he just does his one
plays
thing
with
really
himself.
well.
So again, where's the third guy coming? Which is why you understand the Victor Oladipo thing, which is why you desperately want to see it, which is why the Jalen Roses and other people in the world declared the Heat the East favorites when they got Victor Oladipo, because they thought Victor Oladipo would actually play.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Inside the Paint, sponsored by Pallet Rack City. We are going to blitz through the last segment here. Look at the schedule and look at seating.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
On the battlefield, there's a saying America's military men and women live by. Never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Off the battlefield, Wounded Warrior Project operates with the same goal. Wounded Warrior Project was created to help our men and women returning home with the scars of war, whether those scars are physical or mental. Wounded Warrior Project. We never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Learn more about what we do at woundedwarriorproject.org.
When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547.
If you're looking for a change from the everyday restaurant, then you need to get to Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant in Pompano Beach. Brats, Wiener Schnitzel, homemade potato pancakes, pretzels with mustard, and lots of German beer. Take their famous Boot Tour Challenge, and there's now outdoor seating available in their new beer garden with live music. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Checkers Old Munchin Restaurant, or call them for reservations or pickup at 954-785-7565. So get over to 2209 East Atlantic Boulevard in Pompano Beach to Zagat-rated Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant.
This Sunday, Inter Miami CF visits Nashville SC at Nissan Stadium. Join OnSideRadio.com as we broadcast live from Dangerous Minds Brewing Company in Pompano. Our pregame broadcast watch party starts at noon. Game time is at 1 p.m. Listen to all the games by going to our website at OnSideRadio.com and download any of our apps. Follow Inter Miami CF all year long on your home for football. OnSideRadio.com.
When you're looking to add that extra style and protection for your home or business, visit A Shade Above Window Fashions in Davie or Sunrise, where plantation shutters are a major part of our business, and they look great in any home. We have them in white, stained colors, and wood tones. We can even motorize your shutters like the one in the OnSideRadio.com studio. A Shade Above Window Fashions, 954-434-4774. That's 954-434-4774. Love the space you live in. A Shade Above Window Fashions.
Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local. It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah!
All right, welcome back to Inside the Paint on OnSideRadio.com. Here until 11 o'clock here every Monday from 10 to 11. All right, let's, before we get into the schedule that is this week, let's get into what happened last week and why it was so important. That loss to Atlanta was
devastating. And the reason, Ethan, is this. I know a lot of people think that divisions don't matter anymore in the NBA. However, after a head-to-head tiebreaker and a multiple-team tiebreaker, the first tiebreaker is division champion. Well, we know that the Knicks and Celtics are not going to win their division because they're in the same division as Brooklyn and Philadelphia. So if the Heat wind up in a 3-team tie with Atlanta and the Knicks, or a 4-team tie with someone else, the first thing that will be determined is the Southeast Division Championship, which Atlanta not only leads, but now has the tiebreaker on the Heat because of Friday. It was devastating Because of that, the Heat will lose any multiple-team tiebreaker involved with Atlanta because of that loss. That loss was more than 2 losses for the Heat. And now it pretty much means that unless the head-to-head tie is only against the Knicks, they are 1-2 against Atlanta. They are 0-2 against Charlotte. They are 0-1 against Boston with 2 left in Boston. They are screwed on tiebreakers.
So getting into this week, and we can look way ahead at those 2 games against Boston, which may end up determining this thing. But,
Sure.
but taking obviously, look, you can't afford a loss to Chicago tonight.
No,
but,
and maybe the only saving grace and silver lining about the fourth quarter Saturday was it woke him up.
Yeah.
And it let him know that, hey, you cannot take your foot off the pedal, off the gas against any team. So maybe that works in their favor. Goran is back. That helps also.
Okay, now take a look at the Spurs, right, coming up on Wednesday.
And again, the opposite. You slapped a team. They are in a desperate fight for the play-in in the Western Conference. I don't know if you beat Greg Popovich 2 times in 8 days. They better be ready for that one.
Well, they're going to get in the play-in, San Antonio, because you look right now, New Orleans is a full 4.5 back of Golden State for 10. I think Portland, Memphis, San Antonio, Golden State are going to be the 4 play-in teams. Probably. I mean, well, Dallas.
Right,
we'll
but if
see
you're
what
San
happens.
Antonio, you'd rather play the 9-10 at home than at Golden State. You know,
Yeah,
so you have, unless Portland falls that far down. Bottom line is San Antonio, every game will be meaningful because of that race. Remember, if you're 7 or 8, you get 2 shots to win in the play-in. If you're 9 or 10, 1 loss, you're done.
Wow, we're looking at Denver Lakers first round. If Jamal Murray had been healthy, that could have been a conference final that we would have been looking at.
And instead, Lakers will be the lower seed and an overwhelming favorite.
All right, so
and then we get to the end of the week, and here's what's interesting about the Heat. Okay, you are at Cleveland on Saturday and Charlotte, huge playoff implications game on Sunday.
Do you see people against Cleveland?
They are going to try to sit, I think, everyone. Well, not everyone. Okay, I think Goran and Andre, that's the night they get off. They haven't been playing back-to-backs. If Tyler's foot is acting up, you got to be careful because you still have guards in Colin Sexton and Darius Garland who could go off. And I spoke to someone at the Heat, and they said, you know us. It's the games you don't expect that we wind up slipping in. They need to get both of those. I don't know of the Heat's final 11 games, anything outside of maybe 9-2, they're going to be in problem, at least in tiebreakers for the play-in.
And the thing about 9-2 is they've only had one stretch that even resembled that this year.
Yes, they had that great, it was 11 of 12.
Yes, 11 of 12 with Jimmy playing at that incredible level. And I just wonder at this stage, too, because we've talked about Jimmy very little on this show, which is not like us. I just wonder at what point Jimmy hits the wall a little bit, not physically because he's missed some time this year, but just mentally and emotionally from having to pick up this group every single night. It feels like if he doesn't come through in the fourth, and then you see sometimes he will make mental mistakes in the fourth quarter. It happened the other night. Remember, it happened a little bit in the bubble against Toronto. Another thing where there's 2 straight games.
And as I wrote in my story at the Sun Sentinel, Spo didn't want to put Jimmy in that early in the fourth quarter, and Spo called a timeout to try to settle. It didn't work. Boom, Chicago scores.
He doesn't like putting him in until between 6 and 8 minutes.
And he had to put him in again. It was 9 minutes or so.
Yeah.
It was go time. They're relying on Jimmy Butler way the heck too much. That's when Jimmy sometimes snaps, like he did after the game in Minnesota. This time he held his tongue after the game in Atlanta.
I like him snapping, though.
Because of what he said a week earlier.
Yeah.
He realized, sort of like us in the aggregators, you're not going to catch me again, guys. I'm going to go the other way. But they are mentally... See, I disagree with you. I think they are mentally exhausting Jimmy Butler because it always has to be on him.
No,
they've got to find someone else. They've got to find something else. They've got to find a consistency Spo has to find to make it work. That's why... It really... Our show's going full circle. That's why it's been such a trying year all around.
It has been a trying year, and it's also why, and I don't have a problem with this because we saw a lot of this during the Big Three, but it's also why Jimmy went at Bam a little bit the other night, I think, because it's like Jimmy looks around, and right now with Goran not being Goran and Tyler being so inconsistent,
when's the last
he's the
time,
only guy he can look to.
And I know I'm going to start a bad thing here in the last minute of the show, but when's the last time Jimmy complimented Tyler? When's the last time he made a Tyler Tuesday joke or something like that?
That's kind of what we were getting at last week. That got taken out of context.
But the point I'm making is Jimmy is looking for a friend,
right?
Which is why I think when we talked about it in our second segment today, he might be looking as Victor Oladipo as that friend. He's looking for someone. He realizes they need a +1 right now. That's what they got to find. Maybe it's a rejuvenated Goran. He loves him some Goran. But there has to be someone else to help him out because Jimmy Butler is as much on an island right now as he felt he was in Chicago during the Hoiberg era, as he felt he was in Minnesota when Karl Anthony Towns wasn't producing. He needs a friend.
That's it for today. Aggregators, have at it. We'll be back next Monday at 10 a.m.
that it's springtime, it's only getting hotter here in South Florida. Make sure your AC in your home or business is running smoothly by investing in a preventative maintenance plan from M&S Air Conditioning. And M&S is a Mitsubishi Diamond Elite contractor. When you purchase a new Mitsubishi electric